Hey, Lauren, so excited to have you join our group and talk to us today.
Thank you so much. I love what you guys do. I love how you're disseminating information and it's user friendly, and as a parent, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
you're very welcome. I know I would have loved to have had the option to just listen to people talk about what they are gifted at or what they know about because being dyslexic, reading is not my go-to thing to do. So it's so awesome that we have this new option available to us today.
It's fantastic.
So, Lauren, you have a ton of background with learning struggles, both professionally and personally. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? And then we'll talk about um, what are we going to talk about? Functional behavior assessments and how that can benefit people.
Yes. So I have a rich background. I fell into the world of educating individuals with autism, autistic individuals. I'm just going to cater to person and identity first language so that everybody's just included today. And I started in the field in 2004, and it was because I knew what ABA was. And it was a science about socially significant behaviors. And from there, I worked my way up. I worked in residential schools. I was an early intervention provider. I worked in really premier um, autism only schools, and I then went into home programs, and I love that. I love the little guys. I love home programs, and I love the science of ABA so much so I got a master's degree in it and am a BCBA. There's a behavior analyst who I am very fond of, and she created something called the Do Better Collective, and it's based on when we know better, we do better. And I've found a lot of inspiration in that, and it's informed me as a person, like not just as a behavior analyst. And it's not just informing my parenting, but it's making me as a human being step back and say, oh, what else is going on? What is the bigger picture that we're part of right now? And and how can we piece it together to get things done in that more compassionate way so that, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater in the name of teaching.
Well, tell us a little bit more about how functional behavior assessments work. Can you just request that at school? How does one get that started?
Sure. So let's first talk about what they are. So, a functional behavior assessment, or an FBA, really digs into what is the problem behavior? What is the thing that's blocking access to the person's educational day or impairing their quality of life? And so we start by defining what that is. Then we measure, and we're going to measure it in all different circumstances. We're going to measure it during their most favorite class. We're going to measure it during the thing they hate the most. We're going to get some background information to double check that there's not something else going on. Um, because sometimes there are other things like seizures, or the medication is tapering off, or, oh, my kid doesn't eat at home. They're not hungry in the morning. But apparently they're ravenous 10 minutes after getting to school. And so it can kind of help identify all of the pieces in the environment that currently exist. And then it helps us make our best guess as to what's evoking the problem behavior and what's maintaining it. So, behaviors exist relative to their environment. So I keep doing things because something's reinforcing it. And it doesn't matter what that something is, it just keeps happening. So then we have to say, what's that something? Like, let's see what all the variables are. What is it? Okay, our guess is oh, it's getting them out of that class they really don't like. And maybe it's the sound of that bell to go to second period, and then the problem behavior starts. And then if they keep it up, they get told, oh, you need to go to resource room if you can't handle it. And then they've learned that, oh, when it's time for that class I don't like, and I'm a little drama right now, I can get to go to the resource room where the teacher's going to help me. It's a lot quieter, and I can just take it in and do it. And I'm not lost, and it's not too loud. And, this will work for me. So we take all of the measurements and we use those to create our guess. And our guess it's a good guess. Sometimes it's wrong, but it's a good guess as to these are the things that are most likely happening before they engage in problem behavior. And this list over here are the things that are most often happening after they engage in that interfering response. And then we say, okay, let's put it all together. In the presence of this demand, they engage in that response. And then they're moved to a different environment, or the demand goes away, or somebody's making comforting statements about, it's okay, you can do it. You can do it at home if you want. And all of those things come together and we say, oh, this behavior is evoked by demands and it's maintained by escape. Now, let's look at those demands. Let's look at, because it's not just any demand. Like if you tell me to get ice cream, I'm always going to get up and go to get ice cream because I like it. So what demands? Is it the demand to write? Is it the demand for everybody, get out your notebooks? What are the types of demands happening? And then you can plan for your teaching. Like, oh, they really struggle with demands to write. Well, let's figure out how we can make that more enjoyable. How can they access better reinforcement for complying? And if there's a skill deficit, what if it is dyslexia or dysgraphia at play? How can we change it? Do we need to consider assistive technology? Do they need a different access point? So now, there's some problem behavior happening. It's interfering. You notice they're leaving class a lot. You notice you're getting a lot of phone calls home. You say, hey, and this is where you can turn around and say, like, I know they're not engaging in big problem behavior. And I know that, nobody's really getting hurt in this. But I'm really concerned because it's blocking access to their educational day. And maybe it's kind of disruptive for the other students. And you're going to put in writing that you would like to request a functional behavior assessment to be done by your child. And you want to put this request in writing. You want to give it to the special ed teacher and the principal and the LEA so that you can start the documentation of it. They should send you a release so that it can begin. States have some different ideas about what it means to do an FBA and what's required. The BACB says we need consent to do it. And so we need it in writing that the parent or the guardian says, okay, we agree to this. And it has the same rules as other IEP things. So the federal regulations are usually 60 days for an evaluation report to come back. The FBA has the same timeline unless it's different by your state. There's a few times that FBAs might be triggered, and some of those would have to do with student suspension and expulsion. So anytime a student's removed, especially a student who has an IEP, you can reconvene to then either get an FBA or maybe confirm that the behavior plan generated by the FBA is being done with fidelity. And there's a lot of ways to investigate it to see, Is it not being done right, or was the function wrong? And so parsing those things apart is really where it comes down to the science. And sometimes you'll see non-BCBAs or non-BCABAs being the ones to do it. And so sometimes it'll be the school psychologist, sometimes it'll be a teacher. And I'm not saying some of those people aren't really well equipped to do it, but they haven't had as much specific training in the measurement and the analysis of those measures. So I personally, if it were my kid, I'd want a BCABA or a BCBA to do it.
And say those acronyms slower.
Sure. A BCABA, which is a board certified assistant behavior analyst, or a BCBA, which is a board certified behavior analyst.
And can you insist on those?
You can make a very strong case. And if they turn around and say, like, well, we don't have one of those, you can very kindly remind them that IEPs and assessments are based on need, not what the school has. So, and that's for everything, whether it's your kid who needs like a multisensory instruction, or they need some kind of access point to get the information. It doesn't matter if the school has it. All that matters is the student needs it. And like, you know, when we're thinking about kids going to school in like, especially in like a brick and mortar public school, you know, if they've been identified and they have an IEP, they should be receiving FAPE. And FAPE has like 3 parts that make it whole. And that is, we start with a really good evaluation that really describes what their needs are, and the FBA can be part of that evaluation. It could happen at another point because it wasn't needed before. Then our evaluations then drive our IEP, and we have goals created so that students can make progress in light of their circumstances. So that's to say, if an individual has a cognitive impairment, they might not be at grade level at a certain point, but they should still be progressing. And then comes the progress. And that progress with those goals from that IEP, created from that evaluation report, are the 3 parts that come together to provide that free and appropriate education.
That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about when you were talking about something, and now I'm not like really putting all the pieces together to express what I want to say. But that made it gave me some clarity on something that I didn't really understand why, because you always hear them say it doesn't have to be the best, it just has to be appropriate. Yeah. And so you found a way to turn around their appropriate term to make it work to your child's benefit.
Yeah. And my child has a very appropriate education. And some of it came because I followed the research. I mean, it happens to be what I do, but I'm not uncomfortable going into other fields research to see what they say about teaching something. And I might transpose it to be more behavior analytic. I might set up some reinforcer things, but I'm taking that appropriate piece and then cleaning it up so that it's what he needs. And it's still appropriate. And you can never say best, but you can get to appropriate, and you can really take your appropriate intervention and tailor it to that learner's specific needs. And whatever area that they might have the skill most in need of growth, maybe you really fine tune it there. And maybe you put a little bit extra thought into the teaching protocols and maybe you're a little stricter on the criteria for success. And then you're still having this very appropriate intervention. And they're growing.
Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have to make progress on their meetings, which blew my mind. Like they just need to have a benchmark of where they are, but the requirement of
Closing the gap
improvement is not there. Yeah.
So thanks to last year, we had NJRF, which came through, and it removed that de minimis requirement for education. So we went from like, oh, well, that kid with the IEP just needs the minimum. And now we're saying that the kid has to make progress in light of their circumstances.
Oh, okay. And this is federal, not by state?
This is federal, and it's called
interesting.
NDREW, ENDREW, and it's changed the game. And it means that, you know, we're going for more than de minimis progress. And now, like, progress needs to be appropriate in light of their circumstances. And it changed a lot within IDEA, because when we're thinking about that progress, you know, and thinking about where it goes, because everybody gets very stuck on IEPs being for academics, but IEPs are to prepare you for life, whether that be a job, whether that be college, or whether that's life after high school. And all of those things are what an IEP can be teaching you for. And so what is being progressed needs to really come down to that individual learner. And, you know, if they can't access things because of a motor planning concern, whether it be apraxia or developmental coordination disorder, that just is. But it also means we're going to have to still be mindful about teaching some other skills that they will need for life after IEPs.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I need to look that up because I hadn't heard about that, and I do not stay on top of the accommodation, especially now that my baby has graduated high school. But it's important to have a basic understanding of what our rights are. So that's
absolutely awesome. Absolutely. And it's, you know, there's a really great resource. There's an organization, it's called COPA, COPAA, and it's the Council of Parents, Attorneys, and Advocates. And so they do a really nice job of sharing information. And it's a really lovely community.
That's good to know. I know I'm blanking all of a sudden. There's a program I always refer out in Orange County in California that has, they provide free lawyers or accommodations, and task, that's what it's called. And so it's great that there's programs out there that we can find out more resources. Well, Lauren, you were a wealth of information. We're going to have you back to talk to us some more about some other topics.
Absolutely. So, it was such a pleasure. Thank you for everything you do.
Oh, my pleasure. I appreciate that. All right. Well, we will turn this over to the group at this point and see if anyone has any specific questions for you or for me or for anyone else here today.